Hello, welcome to ME 510, Economics and Policy of Engineered Energy Systems. This is part 3 of our three-part module on coal, economics, policy, and markets. Now, coal, as we've already seen from the previous slides, is still a major commodity, and there are large number of projects, both in terms of quantity and size, that are looking at utilizing coal. Many of these projects are in China, but this is still happening worldwide. And this is part of the reason why coal consumption, despite efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, is likely to continue to increase. There are simply too many coal projects that have already been started that we are going to have to finish. But if we are going to try to improve emissions even from these power plants, there are certain strategies that we can try to adopt. If you're looking at a modest reduction in CO2 emissions, then improving the properties of the coal through washing, drying, and pre-treatments, you can reduce emissions by about 5%. If you want reductions of up to 22%, then you need to improve the efficiency of existing plants. This includes installing new subcritical generation systems or supercritical or even ultra supercritical plants with efficiencies of up to 45%. If you want 25% reductions, there are some advanced technologies such as integrated gasification combined cycles. Some of these technologies need to be built from the beginning. They cannot be retrofitted, but they do offer significant efficiency improvements and reductions in emissions. Ultimately, the best goal would be to have zero or close to zero CO2 emissions. In order to do that, carbon capture and sequestration seems to be the promising approach, but it tends to be a fairly expensive implementation, and so there are only a handful of projects being developed around the world. Some of these have seen significant press, but it remains to see if carbon capture and storage will be widely adopted. One industry that is a heavy consumer of coal is the steel industry. China, if you look at statistics, has been building several times the level of infrastructure that countries like the US have built historically. And so the steel consumption zone here is expected to go from 60 million tons to 250 million tons by 2025. This is on an annual basis. And with this consumption, there will be a lot of coal consumed as well. So to give you, again, a sense of magnitude of how much China is growing, you can see here CNN Money quoting that over the next 15 years, China is expected to build New York City 10 times over. Okay? And China is by far consuming more steel than the rest of, almost as much as the rest of the world combined. Okay, that's just how massive infrastructure development is in China. And in order to fuel this development, China has a lot of its own coal, but it also will need coal to be brought in. And so this trading of global trade of coal requires significant infrastructure as well. We saw the barges for oil exploration. Well, here's a barge for coal transportation, and these are massive transportation units that travel around the world. To give you an idea of how coal is traded, you can see here China is one of the top 10 producing countries worldwide, but it's also the top consumer worldwide, at least in 2003. These numbers may have shifted. China and the US are leading the way in both producing and consuming, and then you have India as third, South Africa in the top 5, Australia only in the top 5 of producing countries but not consuming countries. And you can see that the top 10 really is led by 2 or 3 main nations, and then the amounts decrease significantly. Finally, this interesting chart here tries to show how global trade of coal is going to change compared to 2002 and projecting up to 2030. What you see here In the clear circles are movements of coal. In 2002, for example, the US exporting 22 million tons of coal to Europe and 16 to Asia. But there's also coal being, and those numbers are expected to decrease. So we see a small decrease to Europe, a small decrease to Asia as well. China, again, both a recipient and an exporter of coal with significant amounts, net amounts here. Africa exporting significant amounts, growing amounts to Europe as well. So you can take some time to look at this graph and see where all the coal flows are going worldwide. And you can read, again, the report by the IEA explaining why they think those would be the flows. If you just want to focus on America, Asia, and Europe, what you see here in millions of short tons are a different version of that graph that makes it a little bit easier to follow. You see Australia here exporting significant amounts of coal to Asia primarily, US to Europe, a little bit to Asia as well. And you see flows from South America to Europe and South Africa as well. That concludes our discussion on coal. In our next module, we will continue talking about fossil fuels and